Jensen Ford's daughter vanished during fireworks, swallowed by a forest that gave up nothing, until a starving boy with two old eyes appeared at dawn with her bracelet, a wounded dog, and evidence of a crime so evil it made a career criminal's blood run cold. The boy wasn't begging for help. He was offering a trade. Willow's location for protection from men who'd already sold 28 children, and wouldn't stop until Brooks was dead. The words came from a boy no older than 8, standing at the iron gates of the Ford estate, with mud caked on his torn sneakers, and a German shepherd sitting alert beside him, its amber eyes scanning the property with trained precision. Jensen had spent 12 hours watching his security fail. Thermal imaging detected nothing. Tracking dogs lost the scent at the garden's edge. And every camera on the property showed Willow simply vanishing during the gala's fireworks display, leaving only questions and the metallic taste of fear in his mouth. The boy's voice carried through the intercom with unsettling certainty, cutting through the chaos of walkie-talkie chatter and helicopter rotors overhead. Jensen's hand froze on the whiskey glass he'd been gripping since dawn, broke over his fruitless nightmare. Every muscle in his body screamed for action. Yet all his power meant nothing against a child's disappearance. His head of security, Grant, moved to dismiss the child with a wave. "Boss, we've had 14 false tips already. Fortune seekers, attention seekers, the usual vultures circling tragedy." Grant's exhaustion showed in the purple shadows beneath his eyes. 12 hours of failure weighing heavy on his shoulders. But something in the boy's stance stopped Jensen cold. The child wasn't begging or performing desperation for an audience. He simply stood there with his dog, waiting with the patience of someone who'd learned early that adults rarely listened the first time. His clothes were threadbare but clean, his posture straight despite obvious hunger. But what he discovered next changed everything. Jensen pressed the intercom button himself. "What's your name? And why should I believe you?" His voice came out harsher than intended, scraped raw from hours of shouting orders into the darkness that had swallowed his daughter whole. "I'm Flynn, and this is Ranger." The boy's hand rested on the German shepherd's head with practiced gentleness. "We live in the woods past your property. Ranger found something this morning that belongs to a little girl." His matter-of-fact tone carried none of the manipulation Jensen expected from someone claiming impossible knowledge. The dog's ears swiveled forward at his name, intelligence gleaming in amber eyes that tracked every movement beyond the gate. A fresh wound marked his left foreleg, recently cleaned but untreated, the kind of injury that would send most animals whimpering for shelter. Yet Ranger sat perfectly still, focused entirely on the estate beyond the iron bars. Grant stepped closer to Jensen, lowering his voice. "Sir, this is wasting time we don't have. The FBI arrives in 40 minutes and they'll want answers about why we're entertaining random children instead of expanding the search radius." Professional concern masked something deeper, the unspoken acknowledgement that after 12 hours, statistics turned brutally against them. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone you love disappear, or if a story about an unlikely hero already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people who believe in hope against impossible odds. Jensen studied the boy through the security monitor, cataloging details his years in dangerous business taught him to notice. Flynn's eyes held no calculation, no performance of grief designed to extract money or favor. Instead, they carried the weight of someone who'd seen adults fail children before and expected nothing different now. "Open the gate." The command left Jensen's mouth before conscious thought caught up. Grant's protest died at the look on his boss's face, the expression of a man with nothing left to lose and everything riding on instinct. 12 hours of sophisticated technology had produced exactly nothing. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. The iron gates swung open with mechanical precision, and Flynn walked through without hesitation. Ranger moved beside him with a slight limp, favoring his injured leg, but never breaking stride. The boy's gaze swept the estate's manicured grounds with the quick assessment of someone who'd learned to map escape routes by reflex. Jensen met them halfway down the drive. Unable to wait inside while Possibility walked toward him on dirty sneakers. Up close, Flynn was smaller than he'd appeared on the monitor. Sharp cheekbones suggesting missed meals, and a childhood that skipped past softness straight into survival. The boy carried himself like an old soul trapped in a young body. "Show me what Ranger found." Jensen forced his voice lower, gentler than the desperation clawing at his chest. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the estate, marking the passage of time in a night that refused to end. Every second Willow remained missing felt like a stone added to the weight crushing his lungs. Flynn reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small object wrapped in a clean cloth. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a silver charm bracelet Jensen recognized with a jolt that went through him like voltage. What she found in the envelope froze her in place. Willow's bracelet, the one her mother gave her before the accident claimed her life 2 years ago. The one Willow never removed. Ranger found this near the old creek bed about 2 miles into the forest. Flynn's voice remained steady, but his fingers trembled slightly as he offered the bracelet. There were 2 sets of footprints there, both small. One belonged to a girl around 6, the other to a boy maybe 4 years old. Information delivered with the precision of someone who'd learned to observe details adults missed. Grant moved forward, but Jensen raised a hand, taking the bracelet himself. The metal was cold against his palm, and a smudge of mud still clung to one of the charms. His daughter had been alive this morning. Alive and somewhere in the forest that stretched for miles beyond his property's carefully controlled boundaries. 2 sets of prints. Jensen's mind raced through implications. 2 sets of prints. Jensen's mind raced through implications. Who's the other child? Flynn's jaw tightened, the first crack in his composed exterior. My brother, Brooks. He's 4 years old. The boy's voice dropped lower, urgent now. And there are men looking for him. Bad men. Your daughter saw them chasing us yesterday. She helped us hide. Now they're looking for all 3 of us. Someone in the room was lying. But who? The words hung in the pre-dawn air like smoke. Grant moved closer, his hand instinctively going to the radio at his belt. But Jensen held up a hand, stopping him. Something in Flynn's tone, not panic but the careful precision of someone delivering life-or-death intelligence, demanded full attention. Start from the beginning, Jensen said, crouching down to Flynn's level. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into the boy's young face, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from running on adrenaline and fear for too long. Tell me everything. Flynn's hand tightened on Ranger's collar, seeking comfort from the only constant in his fractured world. Yesterday afternoon, Brooks and I were in the forest. We've been living out here for 3 weeks, staying ahead of the system. He said the system with the bitterness of someone who'd learned to survive despite it, not because of it. We were careful. We always are. But yesterday, these men showed up. Not police. Not social workers. Men in expensive cars who didn't belong in the woods. Grant exchanged a look with Jensen. Expensive cars. Professional hunters. This was escalating beyond a simple missing child case. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. Brooks panicked and ran, Flynn continued, his voice steady but his eyes haunted. I chased after him, but he's fast when he's scared. We ended up near your property line. That's when we heard the fireworks starting. Brooks was crying, making noise, and the men were getting closer. He paused, swallowing hard. Then your daughter appeared. Jensen's breath caught. Willow. She was wearing a fancy dress, looked like a princess. A ghost of a smile flickered across Flynn's face before disappearing. She heard Brooks crying and came to see what was wrong. When she saw the men coming through the trees, She didn't hesitate. She grabbed Brooks's hand and told us to follow her, said she knew a place to hide. The image of his 6-year-old daughter, in her party dress, leading 2 terrified boys away from predators made Jensen's chest constrict. That was Willow, pure empathy wrapped in fearlessness, just like her mother. She took us deep into the forest, Flynn said. Showed us an old drainage tunnel near the creek. We all hid there until the men gave up searching and left. But when we tried to leave, Willow's bracelet got caught on something in the tunnel. She said it was okay, that she'd get it later. She wanted to make sure we got somewhere safe first. Where is she now? Jensen's voice was raw. There was one detail everyone missed. With Brooks, in a place I know. Flynn met Jensen's eyes directly. I came back this morning to check if the men were still around. That's when Ranger found the bracelet caught on a tree root near where we entered the tunnel. I knew you'd be looking for her, knew you'd need proof she was alive. Grant stepped forward, his professional mask cracking slightly. Son, if you know where they are, you need to tell us right now. We'll send a team. No. Flynn's response was immediate and sharp. No teams. No official anything. The men who are after Brooks, they have connections. They know when official channels get involved. That's how they've stayed ahead of us for 3 weeks. He looked at Jensen with eyes far too old for his face. Your daughter is safe right now because she's with me and Brooks, and those men don't know where we hide. But if you bring in authorities, make noise. Use radios and helicopters. They'll hear, they'll know, and they'll come. Jensen studied the boy. Every instinct he'd honed in years of navigating dangerous territory, telling him Flynn was right. Predators didn't fear official channels. They knew how to navigate them, corrupt them, use them. But they feared men like Jensen, who operated outside the rules when necessary. The men hunting your brother, Jensen said carefully. What do they want? But this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Flynn's expression hardened. Brooks saw something he shouldn't have. Our foster father was part of something big, an operation. Brooks is 4 years old, but he's smart, and he remembers faces, places, conversations. They can't let him talk to anyone who'll actually listen. An operation, Grant repeated, his voice tight. What kind of operation? The kind where children disappear and nobody asks questions because the paperwork says they were placed somewhere safe. Flynn's matter-of-fact delivery of horror made the words even more chilling. Brooks is a loose end they're trying to tie up. And now your daughter's a witness to them hunting us. That makes her a problem for them, too. The full scope of the danger crashed over Jensen like a wave. This wasn't a child who wandered off and got lost. This was his daughter caught in the crosshairs of an organization that trafficked in children and eliminated threats. Willow had stepped between predators and their prey out of pure kindness, and now she was marked. Grant's hand went to his radio again. Sir, we need to call this in. FBI, State Police. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. No. Jensen's voice cut through the dawn with absolute authority. Flynn's right. We bring in official channels, we alert whoever's hunting these boys. We make Willow a bigger target than she already is. He looked at his head of security. We find the children first. Then we deal with whoever's hunting them. Boss, that's not protocol. I don't care about protocol. Jensen stood, his decision made with the same decisive instinct that had kept him alive in a dangerous world. My daughter intervened to protect an innocent child from predators. That makes those predators my problem. And I handle my problems my way. Grant held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 12 years of working together meant Grant understood when Jensen Ford made a decision based on something deeper than logic. When the Mafia boss in him recognized a threat that needed to be eliminated before official justice could fail. How many men do you trust completely? Jensen asked. 4, maybe 5, Grant replied. Men who understand discretion. Get them. Armed, civilian vehicles, No radios. Phones on silent. We move as a small unit, fast and quiet. Jensen turned to Flynn. You can guide us to where Willow and Brooks are hiding? Yes. Flynn's relief was visible, the first emotion other than careful control that he'd shown. But we need to go now. I left them supplies for 12 hours. After that, Brooks will get scared and might try to come back on his own. From here on, the rules of the game changed. Then we move now. Jensen looked down at Ranger, who'd sat patiently through the entire exchange, his intelligent eyes tracking every word. Can he track if we get close? Ranger can track through anything, Flynn said with absolute certainty, his hand gently touching the dog's head. He's the reason we've stayed alive this long. Jensen made the call. Within 15 minutes, Grant had assembled 4 men in civilian clothes, each carrying concealed weapons, each with the hard-eyed competence of professionals who'd worked in Jensen's darker business ventures. 2 Range Rovers sat ready in the drive, engines running, as the first true light of dawn broke over the estate. Flynn stood beside the lead vehicle with Ranger, looking impossibly small against the assembled force of armed men. But his posture remained straight, his voice steady as he pointed to the map Grant spread across the hood. Here, Flynn said, indicating a section of forest about 5 miles northeast. There's an old lumber mill. It's been abandoned for years, but the structure's still solid. That's where they are. Jensen committed the location to memory, then looked at the boy who'd walked through his gates with impossible knowledge and a wounded dog. You're riding with me. We're bringing your brother home, Flynn, and my daughter. And then we're going to have a conversation about the men who thought they could hunt children on my land. The promise in those words was cold and absolute. Flynn met his eyes and nodded, recognizing a predator who'd just chosen to hunt on behalf of prey instead of against it. They loaded into the vehicles, and the small convoy rolled out of the estate as the sun finally broke the horizon. Jensen drove with Flynn in the passenger seat, Ranger in the back, his injured leg bandaged by one of Grant's men. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the forest ahead, his body tense with purpose. The hunt had begun. The Range Rover ate up the paved road quickly, but as they turned onto the forest access route, the ride became rougher, forcing Jensen to slow. Flynn sat perfectly still in the passenger seat, his small frame rigid with tension, eyes scanning the increasingly dense tree line. Your daughter didn't have to help us, Flynn said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled over the vehicle. She could have gone back to her party, pretended she didn't see anything, but she didn't. Jensen's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's who Willow is. She doesn't walk away from people who need help. Pride and fear warred in his chest. His daughter's empathy was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Her mother was the same way. Flynn glanced at him, and Jensen saw the question forming before the boy asked it. She's not around anymore? He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for family. Died 2 years ago. Car accident. The words still tasted like ash. Willow was 4. She doesn't remember much about her mother, but she inherited that core of absolute goodness. He paused. The kind that makes you run toward trouble instead of away from it. Brooks is like that too, Flynn said softly. That's why he got into this mess. He saw something wrong and tried to tell someone. Didn't understand that some adults don't want to hear the truth. In the rearview mirror, Jensen could see Grant's vehicle following close behind, and further back, the second Range Rover with the additional security. All of them were putting themselves at risk based on nothing but his instinct and a child's word. But that instinct, honed over years of reading people in life or death situations, screamed that Flynn was telling the truth. Grant's voice crackled through Jensen's phone on speaker. Boss, I need to say this one more time. We should call the state police. They have resources, protocols for child recovery. Protocols that leak, Jensen interrupted. Protocols that go through official channels that can be monitored, manipulated, delayed. He'd seen it too many times. Justice delayed until it became meaningless. Evidence disappearing. Witnesses silenced. How long before we call it in, Grant? How many hours of paperwork and jurisdiction fights before anyone actually moves? If people who prey on innocent children and operate in the shadows make your blood boil like they do mine, hit that subscribe button and join us. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's stand together against everyone who's ever hurt the defenseless. Procedure exists for a reason. So does instinct. Jensen's voice hardened. I've built everything I have by knowing when to follow rules and when to break them. This is a break them situation. He glanced at Flynn. The men hunting Brooks, they're professionals. They've kept ahead of the system for weeks because they understand how it works. They know its blind spots, its delays, its weaknesses. And you think going rogue is the answer? Grant's frustration bled through. I think my daughter is in a forest with a 4-year-old boy who's marked for death by people who traffic in children. I think every minute we waste on protocol is a minute those men get closer. Jensen's jaw set. We find the children first. We secure them. Then we call in every authority that exists and let them sort out jurisdiction. But I'm not gambling Willow's life on the system working efficiently. The phone went quiet for a moment. Then Grant sighed. You're the boss. But when this goes sideways, I'm saying I told you so. When this goes right, you can say whatever you want. Jensen ended the call and looked at Flynn. Your brother, Brooks, what's he like? Flynn's expression softened slightly. He's brave. Braver than me sometimes. He doesn't understand why adults hurt kids, why the system that's supposed to protect us fails. He still believes people should do the right thing. The boy's voice caught. I've been trying to teach him that trust gets you killed, but he doesn't learn. He keeps hoping. This choice would define the rest of his life. Hope isn't a weakness, Jensen said. It is when you're 4 and running for your life from men who see you as a problem to solve. Flynn's bitterness was sharp enough to cut. I've kept us alive for 3 weeks by not hoping, by not trusting, by assuming every adult is a threat until proven otherwise. That's survival. Jensen understood that calculus. He'd made similar calculations in his own world, where trust was currency and betrayal was common. You trusted me, he pointed out. Walked through my gate with nothing but a bracelet and a story. I didn't have a choice, Flynn admitted. Willow's father would look for her, would have resources, would care enough to listen. I gambled that you'd be different from the social workers and cops who've spent 3 weeks dismissing a kid trying to protect his little brother. That's still trust, even if it's calculated. Jensen slowed as the road deteriorated further, navigating around a fallen branch. You could have left the bracelet at the gate and disappeared. Instead, you stayed, offered to guide me. Put yourself at risk. Flynn was quiet for a long moment. Willow helped us. That means something. It means everything. He turned to look at Jensen directly. Your daughter is 6 years old, and she stood between my brother and men who wanted to hurt him. She didn't owe us anything, but she helped anyway. That's the kind of person who deserves saving. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. The simple declaration hit Jensen harder than any corporate negotiation or criminal threat ever had. This child, this 8-year-old who'd survived 3 weeks on the run, had a code as absolute as any oath Jensen had ever sworn. Loyalty for loyalty. Protection for protection. Help given was a debt that must be repaid. Then we save all 3 of them, Jensen said firmly. Willow, Brooks, and you. I can take care of myself. I know you can. You've proven that. Jensen cut off the protest gently. But you shouldn't have to. You're 8 years old, Flynn. You should be in school, arguing about playground rules, worried about homework. not navigating how to keep your brother alive while predators hunt you through a forest. Flynn's composure cracked slightly, his eyes suspiciously bright. The world doesn't care what an 8-year-old should be doing. No, Jensen agreed. But I do. And after we get Brooks and Willow to safety, we're going to have a conversation about what happens next. Because I can promise you this, no one is hunting you or your brother ever again. That ends today. The boy studied him with that too-old gaze, weighing sincerity against experience. Whatever he saw in Jensen's face must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly and turned back to watch the forest. They drove in silence for another 10 minutes before the paved road gave way entirely to a rutted dirt track. Jensen's Range Rover handled it easily, but he slowed further. Aware that noise would carry in the forest, every instinct he'd developed in years of operating in dangerous territory was firing now. They were entering hostile ground. If the men hunting Brooks were professionals, and Flynn's description suggested they were, they'd have the forest under some form of surveillance. How much further? Jensen asked quietly, but he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. Flynn studied the landscape. 2 miles, but we should stop soon and go on foot. My hiding spots are chosen because cars can't reach them. If we can't drive there, neither can they. Smart. The boy thought like someone who'd studied predator patterns and adapted accordingly. Jensen radioed Grant. We're parking in half a mile. Proceed on foot from there. Understood. What's our formation? Jensen looked at Flynn. How do we approach without spooking Brooks? He knows Rangers bark. If he hears it, he'll know I'm coming. Flynn's hand went to the dog's head behind him. But if he hears men's voices first, he'll run. He's learned to run first and ask questions never. So we let Ranger lead, you stay close to him, we follow at a distance, Jensen decided. Grant, tell the men to spread out, maintain visual contact but keep noise to minimum. The dog and the boy take point. We're backup. Boss, that's backwards. That's survival, Jensen corrected. We're in their territory now, following their rules. The boy's kept himself and his brother alive for 3 weeks in this forest. I'm betting on his expertise over ours. He could almost hear Grant's teeth grinding through the phone, but his head of security didn't argue further. They understood each other. Sometimes you had to trust expertise over protocol, especially when the expert was an 8-year-old who'd been living the nightmare you were just entering. Jensen pulled the Range Rover to a stop in a small clearing, and the other vehicles parked behind him. The armed men emerged quietly, checking weapons, scanning tree lines, moving with practiced efficiency. But Jensen noticed they all looked to Flynn when the boy climbed out with Ranger. The dog shook himself carefully, favoring his injured leg, then looked up at Flynn with absolute devotion. The boy knelt and checked the bandage quickly before nodding, satisfied. He's good. He'll hold up. Then let's move, Jensen said. Flynn, you're in charge. We follow your lead. The boy blinked, surprised. Then his spine straightened and he nodded, accepting the responsibility with the same seriousness he'd shown at the gate. Stay quiet. Step where I step. There are some spots where the ground isn't stable. And if Ranger stops, everyone stops. He knows danger before we do. With that, Flynn and Ranger headed into the forest, and Jensen Ford, a man whose word was law in a criminal empire, followed an 8-year-old boy deeper into the woods, trusting that instinct and desperation were better guides than power and protocol. Behind them, Grant caught Jensen's eye and shook his head, but he was smiling slightly. After 12 years together, Grant recognized when his boss was operating on the same lethal instinct that had built their organization. The difference was that this time, Jensen wasn't hunting threats to his empire. He was hunting the men who'd made the mistake of threatening his daughter. And that, Grant knew from experience, meant someone was about to learn a very painful lesson about what happened when you touch something belonging to Jensen Ford. The forest closed around them like a living thing. dense canopy filtering sunlight into cathedral shafts that illuminated drifting pollen and the occasional bird cutting through the stillness. Flynn moved through it with practiced ease, his small form navigating around roots and undergrowth with barely a sound. Ranger limped beside him, nose working constantly, ears swiveling to catch sounds the humans missed. Jensen followed 3 paces behind, close enough to protect but far enough to let Flynn maintain control. Behind them, Grant and the 4 security men spread out in a loose perimeter, weapons concealed but ready. The professional hunters moved quietly, but compared to Flynn's ghost-like progression, they sounded like elephants crashing through underbrush. After 20 minutes of steady hiking, Flynn raised a hand, and everyone froze. The boy knelt beside Ranger, murmuring something too quiet for Jensen to hear, and the dog's tail wagged once before going still. Flynn turned to Jensen and gestured him closer. "See those marks?" Flynn pointed to scratches on a tree trunk at knee height. "I leave signs for myself. We're close to the first checkpoint." "Checkpoint?" Jensen kept his voice low. He knew something that no one else in the building did. "Places where I can stop and make sure no one's following. Where I can see without being seen." Flynn's eyes scanned the forest with systematic precision. "Brooks and I have 4 safe spots in this forest. We rotate between them, so if someone finds one, they don't find all of them." "You set up an entire network," Jensen said, impressed despite the grimness of why it was necessary. "Had to. We couldn't stay in one place or they'd eventually box us in." Flynn stood, apparently satisfied with whatever he'd observed. "The lumber mill is our primary spot. It's the safest because it has multiple exits and good sightlines. But it's also the furthest from town, which means supplies are harder." Grant moved up beside them. "How long could you 2 last out here on your own?" "We've been doing it for 3 weeks," Flynn said simply. "I steal food from campsites when people aren't looking, fill water bottles from the creek. Brooks knows to stay hidden and quiet while I'm gone." The matter-of-fact delivery of child survival techniques made Grant's expression tighten. "You've had to do this because the foster system failed you," Jensen said quietly. Flynn's laugh was bitter and too old. "The foster system didn't fail. It worked exactly as designed, shuffling kids around, keeping paperwork moving, everyone getting paid. It just wasn't designed to actually protect us." He resumed walking. "Brooks and I learned that early." Something didn't add up, and the truth was darker than he expected. They continued deeper into the forest, the terrain growing progressively more difficult. What had started as relatively flat woodland gave way to rolling hills, then steep inclines. Ranger began to struggle with his injured leg, but he never stopped, never slowed beyond what was necessary. The dog's determination reminded Jensen of combat veterans he'd known, wounded but refusing to quit until the mission was complete. Flynn called a brief halt near a stream, letting everyone refill water bottles and check equipment. The boy produced a protein bar from his pocket, broke it in half, and gave one portion to Ranger before eating the other. Jensen noted the gesture. Even rationing supplies, Flynn made sure his dog ate first. "Tell me about the foster father," Jensen said as they rested. "The one running the operation." Flynn's expression went cold. "Martin Voss. Had a nice house, nice neighborhood, nice smile for the social workers. He took in 8 kids at a time, always the ones nobody wanted, the ones with behavior problems, the ones who'd been in the system too long. The ones everyone else rejected." The boy's voice dropped. "That's how he got away with it. Nobody missed those kids when they disappeared." "Brooks witnessed something," Grant prompted. Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. "Brooks doesn't sleep well. Nightmares from before we entered the system." Flynn stared at the stream, not seeing it. One night he got up and went downstairs for water, heard voices in Martin's office, peeked through the door and saw Martin on a video call with a man, showing him pictures of kids. Our kids, the ones living in the house. Martin was taking bids, like an auction. Jensen's hands curled into fists. Human trafficking. Brooks didn't understand what he was seeing. He's 4, but he knew it felt wrong. He came and got me, told me what he heard. Flynn's jaw tightened. I understood immediately. I've been in enough homes to know the signs. But understanding and having proof are different things. I snuck down to Martin's office the next day when he was out. Found files, records, documents about placements that never went through official channels. You documented evidence, Grant said. Took pictures with Martin's own camera phone and emailed them to myself. Then deleted the sent folder so he wouldn't know. Flynn finally looked up. I was going to take them to the police. Had it all planned. But Martin must have noticed something was off because that night he came to our room. Told us he knew we'd been snooping. Said it was a shame because we'd been good merchandise. The word merchandise landed like a physical blow. Jensen felt his rage crystallize into something cold and focused. This wasn't just about saving children anymore. This was about dismantling an organization that treated human lives like commodities. We ran that night, Flynn continued. Grabbed what we could and went out the window. Martin called in his partners immediately. We've been running ever since. He stood, signaling the break was over. They're not just protecting their operation. Brooks can identify Martin, can testify about what he saw. And I have evidence stored in an email account. We're loose ends they need to tie up. But there was one thing he didn't know about his closest ally. Jensen and Grant exchanged looks. This was bigger than they'd thought. Not just individual predators, but an organized network with resources and reach. The kind of operation that required money, connections, and systematic corruption to function. The email account. Grant said carefully. Do you remember the login? I remember everything, Flynn replied. Every password, every file name, every detail. I couldn't risk writing it down. He tapped his temple. It's all up here. That's another reason they want me. It's not just what Brooks saw. It's what I can prove. Then we have leverage, Jensen said. Evidence that can bring down the entire network. If we survive long enough to use it, Flynn pointed out. And if anyone actually listens. I tried reaching out to a social worker named Sierra Wells. She was investigating complaints about Martin's home. But before I could make contact, Martin found out I was trying and we had to run again. Sierra Wells. Jensen filed the name away. If she was investigating the foster system, she was either one of the few clean players or already compromised. They'd need to vet her carefully. The group continued hiking, the forest growing denser and wilder. Ranger's pace slowed further, the injured leg clearly paining him, but his focus never wavered. Every few minutes, the dog would stop, sniff the air, then adjust their heading slightly. He was tracking something, following a scent trail only he could detect. Is he following Willow? Jensen asked. And Brooks. They both have a scent now. Ranger knows we're hunting for them. Flynn watched his dog with open affection and pride. He'll get us there. He always does. They crested a ridge and Flynn stopped abruptly, holding up a fist. Everyone froze. The boy pointed ahead to where the forest opened into a small valley. In the center sat the remains of an industrial structure, the lumber mill. Rusted equipment lay scattered around collapsed buildings, nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. That's it, Flynn whispered. They're in the main building, the one with the intact roof. There's a room on the second floor that's still solid. Jensen studied the structure through small binoculars. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, but Flynn was right. One building retained structural integrity. Multiple entry points, good visibility of approaches, hard to surround completely. A smart hiding place. Grant, Jensen said quietly. Take 2 men and circle around to the north side. Stay out of sight. I'll approach from the front with Flynn and Ranger. Last man stays here as overwatch. Boss, you should stay here. Let me make first contact. It's my daughter in there. Jensen cut him off. And the boys won't trust you. They'll trust Flynn. And they might trust me because I came with Flynn. But a group of armed men suddenly appearing? That's how you spook children who've learned to run first. Grant nodded reluctantly. I'll cover you. But if anything moves wrong, we're coming in hard. Understood. Jensen looked at Flynn. Ready? The boy nodded, his hand on Ranger's collar. Brooks knows my whistle. When we get close, I'll signal. That should bring him out if he hears it. They began descending toward the valley, and with every step closer to the mill, Jensen felt the weight of how much rode on the next few minutes. His daughter was in that building. 2 traumatized boys who'd been running for their lives were in there. And somewhere in the forest, professional hunters were still searching. This was the convergence point, where everything would either resolve or spiral into violence. Jensen Ford had navigated countless dangerous situations in his criminal career, but none had ever felt as high stakes as walking into an abandoned lumber mill following an 8-year-old boy and a wounded dog, hoping to find his daughter alive and unharmed. The metallic taste of fear was back, coating his tongue, but beneath it was something else. The cold, focused rage of a predator who'd identified his prey. Martin Voss and his network had made a critical error. They'd touched Jensen Ford's daughter, and that mistake was going to cost them everything. They reached the valley floor, and the ruins of the lumber mill loomed larger, skeletal and haunting against the morning sky. Rust bled down metal siding in orange tears, and shattered windows gaped like missing teeth. Nature had been aggressive in its reclamation. Vines crawled up walls, saplings pushed through cracked concrete, and moss softened every harsh edge. Ranger's demeanor shifted as they approached. His ears locked forward, his injured leg forgotten as training and instinct took over. The dog moved differently now, slower, more deliberate, his nose working in short, focused bursts. This was a working animal in his element, and despite exhaustion and pain, he was completely focused on his mission. Are you Team Jensen, Flynn, and Ranger? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. This rescue mission is just getting started. Flynn kept pace beside Ranger, one hand resting lightly on the dog's shoulders, reading subtle cues in the animal's body language that Jensen couldn't detect. The boy's face was tight with concentration, fear, and hope warring in his expression. He's got the scent, Flynn whispered. Strong. Recent. They're here. Jensen's heart hammered against his ribs. Behind them, 50 yards back, one of Grant's men remained in position as overwatch, weapon ready. To their north, Grant and the other 2 circled toward the far side of the mill complex. Everyone was in position. Now came the delicate part, making contact without triggering panic. They picked their way through scattered debris, rotted lumber, rusted equipment, broken glass that crunched underfoot despite their efforts at stealth. Ranger navigated it all without hesitation, leading them toward the main structure with the intact roof. Up close, the building was more substantial than it had appeared from the ridge. 3 stories of weathered wood and corrugated metal, listing slightly but fundamentally sound. Flynn paused at the base of an external staircase that climbed the building's exterior. The wooden steps were partially collapsed, but metal framework underneath provided an alternate path. Ranger sniffed the bottom step, then looked back at Flynn and whined softly. They went up, Flynn said. Second floor, like I thought. That moment, everything in the room changed. Jensen studied the staircase. It would hold Flynn's weight easily, probably his own, but it would also broadcast their approach with every creak and groan. Is there another way up? Inside, but it's darker. More places to hide or get trapped. Flynn bit his lip, thinking. The stairs are the better option. Brooks will hear us coming and know it's me, especially with Ranger. Then we go up. Jensen radioed Grant quietly. Target is second floor of main structure. Moving to make contact now. Copy. We're in position. I have eyes on 2 windows facing north. No movement visible. Flynn put a hand on Ranger's collar and gave a quiet command. The dog immediately started up the stairs, moving carefully to test each step before committing his weight. The metal framework held without sound, though the wooden planks creaked ominously. Jensen followed, acutely aware of his size and weight compared to the boy and dog ahead. Each step felt like it might give way, but the structure held. They climbed slowly, stopping twice when Ranger paused to sniff the air, ears swiveling to catch sounds beyond human hearing. The second-floor landing opened onto a catwalk that circled the building's interior. Daylight filtered through gaps in the roof and broken windows, creating a patchwork of light and shadow. The smell was overwhelming. Rot, rust, animal droppings, and the general decay of abandonment. Ranger's tail began to wag. Just slightly, but it was the first sign of anything other than focused tension. The dog pulled forward more insistently, and Flynn had to tighten his grip to keep the animal from breaking into a run. "He knows they're close," Flynn whispered. "He wants to get to them." Jensen's hand went to the concealed weapon at his back, not drawing it, but ready. "Where?" Flynn pointed to a door 20 feet ahead. It hung crookedly on its hinges, partially open. That was the old foreman's office. It has windows on 2 sides for visibility, and the floor is solid. I checked it weeks ago as a potential spot. They approached slowly. Jensen positioned himself slightly ahead of Flynn, every protective instinct screaming to put himself between potential danger and the child beside him. But Flynn had been right. This was his world, his rules, and Ranger was the one with the knowledge they needed. 5 feet from the door, Flynn let out a specific whistle. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long. It wasn't loud, but it carried clearly in the stillness of the mill. Everything stopped. Even Ranger froze, waiting. He realized he wasn't alone. Someone else had arrived. Then, from behind the door, a small voice called out, "Flynn?" The boy's entire body sagged with relief. "Brooks, it's me. I'm with friends. We're here to help." The door creaked open wider and a small figure appeared in the gap. 4 years old, with dirt-smudged face and wide, scared eyes. Brooks was tiny, wearing clothes too big for his frame and holding something close to his chest. A stuffed animal of some kind, worn and loved into near shapelessness. "Flynn!" Brooks's voice broke and he rushed forward, crashing into his brother with enough force to nearly knock Flynn over. Ranger immediately pushed close, tail wagging frantically now, licking Brooks' face and whining with joy. Flynn wrapped his arms around his little brother, and for the first time since appearing at Jensen's gate, the 8-year-old looked his actual age. Tears tracked through the dirt on his face as he held Brooks, murmuring reassurances. "You're okay. You're safe. I've got you." Jensen's throat tightened at the sight, but his attention was already moving past the reunion to the door. "Willow?" A second small figure emerged, more slowly, more cautiously. Willow Ford looked nothing like the princess who'd attended the gala the night before. Her fancy dress was torn and muddy, her hair tangled with leaves and twigs, her face showing exhaustion and strain. But her eyes held the same fierce determination Jensen had seen in her mother. "Daddy?" Willow's voice was small, uncertain, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. What followed next was completely unexpected. "Willow?" Jensen was on his knees without conscious thought, arms open, and his daughter ran to him. She crashed into his chest and he caught her, holding her so tightly he was afraid of hurting her, but unable to loosen his grip. She was real. She was alive. She was here. "Daddy, I was so scared," Willow sobbed into his shoulder. "But Brooks needed help and the bad men were coming and I couldn't leave him and Flynn took care of us, but I lost my bracelet and I didn't know if you'd find us." "Shh, baby. I've got you." You're safe now. Jensen pressed his face into her hair, breathing in the scent of her. Dirt and fear and his daughter. You're so brave. So brave. But I've got you now. Grant's voice crackled through Jensen's radio. Boss, situation. Jensen pulled back just enough to key the radio with one hand, keeping Willow held close with the other. We've got them. Both children safe and unharmed. Flynn's brother is here too. Stand down but maintain perimeter. Copy. Standing down. Jensen looked at the four of them, Flynn still holding Brooks, Ranger pressing against both boys, Willow clinging to him. They were all filthy, exhausted, scared, but alive. We need to move, Jensen said gently. Get you all somewhere safe, somewhere warm with food and real beds. Brooks buried his face in Flynn's shoulder, and Flynn looked at Jensen with that too-old gaze. The men who are hunting us. He didn't want revenge. He needed it. Won't touch you again, Jensen promised, and his voice carried a weight of absolute certainty. I give you my word. You're under my protection now. All of you. You can't promise that, Flynn said, but hope and desperation cracked through his cynical armor. They have resources, connections. They don't stop. Neither do I. Jensen stood, Willow still in his arms. And I'm very good at dealing with people who threaten what's mine. You saved my daughter, Flynn. That means something in my world. That means everything. Flynn stared at him, and Jensen could see the boy's walls crumbling. 3 weeks of running, of being responsible for his little brother's survival, of carrying weight no child should bear. It was all catching up to him now that rescue was finally, impossibly real. Okay, Flynn whispered. Okay. Ranger did good, Jensen said, nodding to the dog. We couldn't have found you without him. Flynn's hand went to Ranger's head, and the boy's composure finally broke completely. He pressed his face into the dog's fur and cried, silently, but with his whole body shaking. Brooks wrapped around his brother from the other side, and Ranger stood perfectly still, supporting them both. Jensen gave them a moment, understanding that this was the release of tension held too long. Willow watched the brothers with her face still buried in Jensen's shoulder, and he felt her grip tighten. Daddy, those men who were chasing Brooks, they were really bad, she said quietly. They said scary things about what they'd do when they caught him. I had to help. I know, baby, and you did exactly right. Jensen kissed the top of her head. But now it's my turn to help. All of us. We're getting you home, and we're making sure no one hurts these boys or anyone else ever again. Grant appeared at the top of the stairs, weapon lowered, relief visible on his face. Sir, we need to move. Staying stationary makes us vulnerable. Agreed. Jensen set Willow down but kept her hand firmly in his. Flynn, can you and Brooks walk? We have a bit of a hike back to the vehicles. Flynn nodded, wiping his face roughly. Brooks clung to him but nodded too, his small hand clutching his stuffed animal. A threadbare wolf, Jensen noticed. They made their way down carefully, Grant leading, Jensen following with Willow, Flynn and Brooks in the middle, and Ranger bringing up the rear despite his injury. The other security men emerged from their positions to form a protective perimeter as they moved through the mill complex and back toward the forest trail. It was only when they were 100 yards from the mill that Jensen allowed himself to truly believe it. They'd done it. Found the children. Brought them out safely. The nightmare was ending. But as they entered the forest and began the hike back to the vehicles, Jensen's mind was already moving to the next phase. This wasn't over. The men hunting Brooks were still out there. Martin Voss and his network were still operating. The threat remained. And Jensen Ford had just made a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost. The children were under his protection now, which meant the predators who dared to hunt them had just made themselves his targets. And in Jensen's world, that was a death sentence they just didn't know they'd received yet. The hike back was slower than the approach. Brooks's short legs struggled with the rough terrain, and Flynn, despite his resilience, was clearly running on fumes. Jensen ended up carrying Willow while Grant took point, and the security team maintained a protective formation around them. They were 20 minutes into the trek when Ranger suddenly stopped, his injured leg finally giving out. The dog sat heavily, panting, and Flynn immediately dropped to his knees beside him. "Ranger, come on, just a little further." Flynn's voice was tight with concern, his hands checking the bandaged leg. The wound had reopened, blood seeping through the makeshift dressing. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. "We need to stop," Jensen said, setting Willow down. "Grant, defensive perimeter. We're taking 10. The security men spread out without comment, creating a protective circle while Flynn tended to his dog. Brooks hovered close, his little hand on Ranger's head, whispering what might have been comfort or prayer. Jensen crouched beside Flynn, watching the boy work with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound with water from his bottle, rewrapping it with strips torn from his own shirt. "You've done this before. Ranger's been hurt before. Living on the streets, you learn basic first aid for both of you." Flynn's voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands shook slightly. "He's been my partner since I was 6. Found him abandoned in an alley, hurt and scared. We've been taking care of each other ever since." 6 years old, Jensen said quietly. "That's when you ran from the system the first time?" Flynn nodded, focused on Ranger's leg. "First foster home. The father had hands that wandered. I complained to the social worker, but nobody believed a kid over an adult with a clean record. So I ran. Lived on the streets for 8 months before they caught me, put me back in. Promised it would be better. But it wasn't. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. Second home was better. Almost good. But the foster mother got sick and couldn't keep taking kids. I got moved again." Flynn's hands stilled on Ranger's leg. Third home was worse than the first. Fourth was bearable. That's where I met Brooks. He'd just entered the system, barely 2 years old. His parents died in a fire. Brooks was quiet, his thumb in his mouth, listening to his brother tell their story. "I knew immediately I had to protect him," Flynn continued. "He was too little, too trusting. The system would eat him alive if someone didn't look out for him. So I became that someone. Got myself moved to whichever home he was in. Made sure I was always his sibling placement. Social workers like keeping brothers together. It's good for their stats." "That's why you stayed in the system," Jensen realized. "You could have run again, disappeared." "But Brooks kept you anchored." "I couldn't leave him." Flynn's voice was fierce. "He's all I have. The only family that matters. So I played their game, followed their rules, moved from home to home, 11 different places in 2 years. Because wherever Brooks went, I went." Grant had moved closer, listening with an expression Jensen recognized. His head of security had his own complicated history with the system. 11 homes in 2 years. That's a lot of instability. Some were okay, some were bad. One was really bad. That's how I learned to recognize the signs of abuse early, how to document evidence, how to plan escape routes from every room I slept in. Flynn finished with Ranger's leg and sat back. "Most people don't pay attention to what kids see, what we overhear, what we figure out. They think we're stupid or naive. That's their mistake. But this wasn't even the most shocking part." "You're neither," Jensen said. "You're one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I've met a lot of dangerous, clever people in my life." Flynn looked up, surprised by the sincerity. "I'm just trying to keep my brother alive. And succeeding against odds that would break most adults." Jensen glanced at Brooks, who'd curled up against Ranger's side, the exhaustion finally claiming him. How did you end up at Martin Voss's place? The social worker, not Sierra Wells, a different one, said it was a good placement. Voss had glowing reviews, a big house, experience with difficult children. She made it sound like we were lucky to go there. Flynn's expression darkened. First week was fine. Voss was charming, attentive, made us feel welcome. But I noticed things. The way he photographed us constantly, the way certain kids would disappear and he'd say they got placed somewhere good, the way he had too many locked rooms and computers with covered cameras. You started investigating, Grant said. I watched, listened, learned his patterns. Voss was careful, but he wasn't careful enough. He didn't think an 8-year-old would piece together what he was doing. Flynn's hands clenched. Then Brooks saw the video call. After that, I had to move fast. Document what I could, create a digital paper trail, find someone to trust outside the system. Sierra Wells, Jensen said. She was the only one who seemed to actually care. I heard her arguing with another social worker about complaints against Voss that kept getting dismissed. She was investigating but kept hitting walls. I thought if I could get her the evidence, she'd believe me. She'd help. Flynn's voice went flat. But before I could make contact, Voss realized we knew, and we ran. He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, 2 days, 16 hours. Flynn's precision was exact. I've been counting, because every hour we stayed ahead was another hour Brooks stayed alive. Jensen felt something sharp and painful lodge in his chest. This child had carried impossible weight, responsibility for his brother's life, evidence of a criminal network, the constant fear of being caught. And he'd done it with nothing but a wounded dog and his own intelligence to keep them safe. You're not running anymore, Jensen said firmly. And you're not responsible for Brooks's safety alone anymore. That's on me now. On us. He gestured to Grant and the security team. We're taking you home, real home. And then we're dealing with Martin Voss and everyone involved in his operation. You can't, Flynn started, but Jensen cut him off. Watch me. Jensen's voice went cold. I've spent 20 years building an organization that operates outside the law when necessary. I have resources, connections, and a very specific set of skills for dealing with people who hurt children. Martin Voss made a mistake when he targeted you and Brooks, but he made a fatal mistake when that target led him to my daughter. Flynn searched Jensen's face, looking for doubt or false promises. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. What about Sierra Wells? She was trying to investigate. She could help. Grant, make a note. We need to find and vet Sierra Wells immediately, Jensen ordered. If she's legitimate, she's an asset. If she's compromised, she's a problem. Already on it, boss, Grant said, already typing on his phone. Ranger's eyes had closed, the dog finally allowing exhaustion to claim him now that he'd completed his mission. Flynn's hand rested on the animal's side, feeling the steady rise and fall of breath. We need to get him to a vet, Flynn said quietly. That leg needs proper treatment. The moment we get back, I'm having my private veterinarian meet us at the estate, Jensen promised. Ranger's a hero. He gets the best care available. Brooks stirred against Ranger's side, blinking sleepy eyes up at his brother. Flynn? Are we safe now? Flynn looked at Jensen, the question implicit. You're safe, Jensen said, directing the words at both brothers. I promise. No one's hunting you anymore. That ends today. Brooks seemed to accept this with the simple faith of a 4-year-old. But Flynn's expression showed the skepticism of someone who'd learned trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. They'd have to prove it to him. Show him through actions, not just words, that this time was different. That the adult offering protection wasn't another false promise in a life full of them. Can you walk? Grant asked Flynn gently. We need to keep moving. The longer we stay stationary, the more vulnerable we are. Flynn nodded and carefully woke Ranger. The dog struggled to his feet, clearly in pain but refusing to quit. With Flynn supporting one side and Grant helping on the other, they got Ranger moving again. The group continued through the forest. Slower but steadier. Jensen carried Brooks now, the little boy clinging to him with his wolf-stuffed animal clutched tight. Willow walked beside them, holding Jensen's free hand with a grip that suggested she had no intention of letting go. As they crested the final ridge and the vehicles came into view, Jensen's phone buzzed. He checked it with his free hand. A message from his contacts in the city. Information he'd requested while in the forest. Martin Voss's address. Current location of his foster home. Known associates. The beginnings of a network map. Jensen's expression went cold as he read. Grant saw it and moved closer. Boss? We've got what we need to start dismantling Voss's operation, Jensen said quietly. The children are the priority right now. Get them safe, fed, rested, medical attention. But after that, we go hunting. Grant finished, his own expression mirroring Jensen's lethal intent. After that, Jensen agreed. We remind people why it's a mistake to make an enemy of me. They reached the vehicles and loaded everyone in carefully. Ranger was given the entire back seat of one Range Rover, Flynn and Brooks sitting on either side of him. Willow refused to leave Jensen's side, so she rode up front, buckled in but holding his hand. As they drove back toward the estate, Jensen's mind was already 3 steps ahead. The children needed immediate care, physical, emotional, practical. But beyond that, there was the matter of justice. Official channels would take months. The evidence Flynn had gathered would need to work through courts, jurisdictions, bureaucracy. Children would remain at risk during that time. Jensen Ford had never been a patient man when it came to threats against his family, and as of today, Flynn and Brooks were family, which meant Martin Voss and his network had just been marked for death. They just didn't know it yet. The Range Rovers pulled through the estate gates as the sun reached its zenith, transforming the nightmare of the past 16 hours into something that felt almost dreamlike in the harsh daylight. Jensen had made 3 calls during the drive, one to his private physician, one to his veterinarian, and one to a trauma counselor who specialized in child victims. All 3 were waiting when they arrived. Dr. Sarah Chen met them at the main entrance, her medical bag already in hand. She was in her 50s, competent and calm. The kind of doctor who'd seen everything and couldn't be shocked. Mr. Ford, I understand we have 4 patients? 3 children and a dog, Jensen confirmed, helping Willow out of the vehicle. My daughter, Willow, missing for 16 hours, found in a forest, likely dehydrated and exhausted but no visible injuries. 2 boys, Flynn and Brooks, 8 and 4 respectively. They've been living rough for 3 weeks, and a German shepherd with a leg wound that needs immediate attention. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she just nodded. Bring them inside. I've set up in the East Wing sitting room. It's comfortable and has good light. The veterinarian, Dr. Marcus Shaw, was already examining Ranger on a portable table set up in the foyer. The dog lay still, trusting despite pain, while Flynn hovered anxiously beside him. He's going to need antibiotics and possibly surgery, Dr. Shaw said, his hands gentle as he probed the wound. The infection hasn't spread yet, but another day or 2 without treatment. He left the implication hanging, but what he discovered next changed everything. Do whatever's necessary, Jensen said. Cost isn't a concern. I want him given the best care available. Dr. Shaw nodded and gestured to his assistant, who began preparing sedatives. Flynn's hand tightened on Ranger's collar. He'll be okay, Dr. Shaw said kindly to Flynn. But he needs to rest and let the wound heal. That means keeping weight off it for at least 2 weeks. Can you make sure he does that? I'll make sure, Flynn said, though his voice shook slightly. Son, you're going to need to let go so we can sedate him for examination, Dr. Shaw said gently. I promise we'll take good care of him. Flynn looked at Jensen, seeking some kind of permission or reassurance. Jensen crouched beside the boy. Ranger will be fine. Dr. Shaw is the best, and you'll see him again in a few hours once he's been treated. But right now you need to let the doctor work and you need to get checked out yourself. I'm fine. You've been living in a forest for 3 weeks, you're exhausted, and you haven't had proper food or water, Jensen said firmly but kindly. You're getting examined whether you like it or not. That's not a request. Flynn hesitated, then finally released Ranger's collar. The dog whined softly but didn't resist as the sedative took effect. Within minutes, he was unconscious, and Dr. Shaw began his work. In the East Wing sitting room, Dr. Chen had already begun examining Willow. Brooks sat on a plush sofa, clutching his wolf and staring around at the opulence with wide eyes. The estate's staff had brought food, simple things that wouldn't upset delicate stomachs. Bread, cheese, fruit, water, and both boys were eating with the single-minded focus of people who'd gone hungry too often. Willow's fine, Dr. Chen reported to Jensen. Dehydration, some scrapes and bruises, exhaustion. Nothing that food, water, and sleep won't fix. But I want her to rest for at least 24 hours before any strenuous activity. She'll rest, Jensen promised, looking at his daughter, who'd fallen asleep on the sofa almost immediately after eating. The trauma counselor, Dr. Lisa Park, sat nearby, just observing for now, letting the children settle before attempting any kind of session. There was one detail everyone missed. Dr. Chen moved to Flynn next. Your turn. Let's get a look at you. Flynn submitted to the examination with the wariness of someone who'd learned to be suspicious of adult attention. Dr. Chen noticed and kept her movements slow and predictable, narrating what she was doing before she did it. Malnutrition, but not severe. You've been eating enough to function, just not enough to thrive, Dr. Chen said as she worked. Several infected insect bites, abrasions on your hands and knees, blisters on your feet. You're underweight for your age and height. And, she paused, noting something. When was the last time you slept for more than a few hours at a time? 5 days ago, Flynn admitted. Someone has to keep watch. Well, you're not keeping watch anymore. That's done. Dr. Chen's voice was firm but warm. You're going to eat regular meals, sleep in a real bed, and let your body recover. Doctor's orders. She moved to Brooks, who was harder to examine. The 4-year-old flinched from touch and wouldn't let go of his stuffed wolf. Dr. Park intervened quietly, sitting on the floor at Brooks's level. That's a very cool wolf, she said, not reaching for him. Does he have a name? Brooks looked at her, then at Flynn for permission. Flynn nodded encouragingly. Shadow, Brooks whispered. His name is Shadow. Flynn gave him to me when I was little. Shadow is an excellent name, Dr. Park said seriously. Does Shadow like doctors? Brooks considered this. Shadow doesn't like when people try to touch me too much. That's very understandable. Shadow is protecting you. That's what good friends do. Dr. Park glanced at Dr. Chen, communicating silently. How about this, Dr. Chen will tell you and Shadow everything she's going to do before she does it. And if Shadow says stop, we stop. Does that sound okay? Brooks thought about it, then nodded slowly. With patience and careful narration, Dr. Chen managed to complete the examination. Her expression tightened slightly as she worked, and Jensen saw her make several notes. What she found in the envelope froze her in place. When she finished, she stood and gestured for Jensen and Grant to follow her into the hallway. Brooks has signs of long-term neglect and possible abuse, Dr. Chen said without preamble, keeping her voice low. Old bruises, healed fractures in his wrist that were never properly set, some scarring that suggests cigarette burns. This child has been systemically hurt over an extended period. Jensen's hands clenched into fists. How old are the injuries? Most are weeks to months old. The fracture is at least 6 months healed, possibly more. The burns, harder to date, but not recent. Dr. Chen met his eyes. Whatever these boys have been running from, they had good reason. Brooks has been hurt by adults who were supposed to care for him. That's going to take significant time and therapy to work through. If you've ever felt invisible, been told you take up too much space, or had someone make you feel like you're too much or not enough, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people who refuse to shrink anymore. He'll have it, Jensen said flatly. Whatever he needs, whatever both of them need. Time, therapy, safety, all of it. Dr. Chen nodded. I'm writing prescriptions for antibiotics, vitamins, and sleep aids if needed, but mostly what they need is stability, safety, and time to heal. Dr. Park will want to start gentle sessions once they've rested, and... She hesitated. You should know, children who've been through this kind of trauma often have difficulties trusting adults, following rules, feeling safe. It's going to be a long road. We'll walk it, Jensen said. They're not going back to the system. They're staying here under my protection, until we can find a permanent solution. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. Good. They need someone who'll fight for them. Lord knows the system won't. But this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Back in the sitting room, both Willow and Brooks had fallen asleep. Flynn was trying to stay awake, his eyes drooping despite obvious effort. You can sleep, Jensen said gently. You're safe here. We have security, locked gates, guards. Nothing's getting in. You don't have to keep watch anymore. Someone has to, Flynn mumbled, but his eyes were closing. I'm keeping watch, Jensen said. That's my job now. Yours is to rest. Within minutes, Flynn was unconscious, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Jensen looked at the 3 sleeping children and felt something shift in his chest. 12 hours ago, he'd been a man whose power meant nothing against his daughter's disappearance. Now he was a man with a mission that was absolutely clear. These children were under his protection, which meant the people who'd hurt them, hunted them, tried to use them as merchandise, they were all targets now. From here on, the rules of the game changed. Grant appeared in the doorway. Boss, we need to talk. Got some information back from our contacts. They moved to Jensen's study, closing the door. Grant pulled up files on a laptop. Martin Voss, 52 years old, licensed foster parent for 8 years. Officially, he's had 73 children placed with him during that time. Unofficially, our sources say at least 20 of those children never showed up in the system after leaving his care. 20 missing children, Jensen said, his voice deadly quiet. 20 that we can confirm. Could be more. The paper trails are deliberately tangled. Kids get moved between multiple homes. Records show them as placed in facilities that don't exist. Or they age out of the system on paper while they're still actually 12 years old. Grant pulled up more files. Voss has connections. Police, social workers, at least 2 judges. It's a network, not just one man. But there was one thing he didn't know about his closest ally. What about Sierra Wells? Clean, as far as we can tell. She's been filing formal complaints about Voss for 18 months. Every complaint gets buried by someone higher up. She's actually suspended right now for harassment after she tried to launch an investigation without proper authorization. So she's the real deal, Jensen said. Someone actually trying to help. Looks like it. I've got her contact information. She's currently staying at a hotel downtown after being locked out of her office. Bring her here, tonight if possible. I want to hear what she knows. Jensen looked at the files. his rage crystallizing into cold purpose. And I want full surveillance on Voss, locations, associates, daily patterns. I want to know everything about this network, who runs it, who profits, who enables, all of it. Boss, if we're going after an organized trafficking ring, we need to be smart about it. These people have resources, connections. So do I, Jensen interrupted. But unlike them, I don't care about profit or covering my tracks. I care about dismantling their operations so completely that no one ever tries this again. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. Grant studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll get the team on it. Full intelligence workup, ready within 48 hours. Make it 24, Jensen said. I want to move fast. Before they realize we have Flynn and Brooks. Right now, they probably think the boys are still in the forest. That's our advantage. They don't know they've lost. A soft knock on the study door interrupted them. Dr. Park stood there, her expression careful. Mr. Ford, Willow's awake. She's asking for you, and she wants to talk. I think you should hear what she has to say. Jensen followed Dr. Park back to the sitting room. Willow sat on the sofa, looking impossibly small in her torn party dress. But her eyes were clear and focused. Daddy, I need to tell you something, she said as he sat beside her. About the bad men. You don't have to, Jensen started, but Willow shook her head. I need to. Because they said things. Important things. Willow took a breath, and Jensen saw her gathering courage. When they were chasing Brooks, I heard them talking. They didn't know I was there. One of them was on his phone, and he said something about refunding the merchandise if they couldn't recover it. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. The word merchandise hit Jensen like a physical blow. His daughter had heard men describe a 4-year-old child as merchandise. They were talking about money, Willow continued, her voice small but steady. About how much they'd lose if they couldn't find Brooks, and about how they needed to be quiet because there were investigators getting close. She looked up at Jensen. Daddy, they were going to hurt Brooks really bad. I couldn't let that happen. That's why I helped him hide. Jensen pulled his daughter close, his eyes burning. You did exactly right, sweetheart. You saved Brooks's life. But now they're looking for him and Flynn, Willow said. And me too, because I saw them. We all have to stay safe. You will, Jensen promised. I'm making sure of it. All of you, Flynn, Brooks, you're all safe now. Willow relaxed slightly in his arms, accepting his promise with the trust only a child could have in their parent. But Jensen's mind was racing, pieces falling into place with brutal clarity. Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. Martin Voss and his network weren't just fostering children. They were selling them. 20 missing children over 8 years. That was a business model, not isolated incidents. An organized operation with profit margins and loss calculations. They'd referred to Brooks as merchandise to be refunded. As if a child's life had a dollar value and nothing more. Jensen Ford had done many questionable things in his criminal career. He'd hurt people who threatened him. He'd bent laws that got in his way. He'd operated in moral gray areas more often than he cared to admit. But there were lines even he wouldn't cross. And trafficking children was so far over that line, it existed in a different universe of evil. This choice would define the rest of his life. Martin Voss and everyone in his network had just signed their own death warrants. They didn't know it yet. But they would. Very soon. Grant's phone rang at 7 p.m. He stepped out of the study to answer it, returning 5 minutes later with a grim expression. Sierra Wells is in the lobby. She came as soon as I called. Says she has files with her. Everything she's been building against Voss. Bring her up, Jensen said. And Grant? Have someone stay with the children. I don't want them alone. Dr. Park had volunteered to remain overnight. setting up in one of the guest rooms near where the boys were sleeping. Willow was in her own room, door open, with a member of the security team stationed in the hallway. Ranger, freshly bandaged and sedated, was recovering in a comfortable dog bed beside Flynn's temporary room. Everyone was as safe as Jensen could make them. Now it was time to shift from defense to offense. But what he discovered next changed everything. Sierra Wells was in her early 30s, with tired eyes and the determined set of someone who'd been fighting an uphill battle for too long. She carried a weather-beaten laptop bag and looked like she hadn't slept properly in days. "Mr. Ford," she said, shaking his hand. "I'm not sure what this is about, but your man said it was urgent regarding Martin Voss." "It is. Please sit." Jensen gestured to the chairs in his study. Once she was settled, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I have Flynn and Brooks. They're safe, here in my home, under medical care and protection." Sierra's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, relief, disbelief, and finally, wary hope. "You have them? They're actually safe?" "As of this morning, yes. They're safe. Fed, treated by a doctor, sleeping in actual beds for the first time in 3 weeks." Jensen leaned forward. "Flynn told me you've been investigating Voss. That you were trying to help them." "I've been trying to investigate for 18 months, Sierra said, her voice tight with frustration. "But every time I get close to building a case, evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Files get lost. I've been suspended twice for overstepping my authority. Last month, they locked me out of my own office." She pulled her laptop from the bag. "But I kept copies of everything. Every complaint, every suspicious placement, every child who went missing from Voss's care. It's all here." "Show me." He knew something that no one else in the building did. For the next hour, Sierra walked Jensen and Grant through her investigation. The pattern was devastating in its clarity. Voss targeted children who were unlikely to be missed. Those with behavioral issues, no living relatives, multiple failed placements. Children the system had essentially given up on. He'd keep them for a few months, long enough to establish paperwork showing they were difficult cases, Sierra explained, pulling up file after file. Then they'd be transferred to a facility that supposedly specialized in troubled youth. Except when I tracked those transfers, the facilities either didn't exist or had no record of ever receiving the children. 20 confirmed missing, Grant said, reading over her shoulder. 23 now. I found 3 more cases after my suspension. Sierra's voice cracked slightly. 23 children, and nobody seemed to care. When I brought it up, I was told these were just kids who'd run away, or that the paperwork was delayed. But I knew. I knew something was wrong. If people like Martin Voss who tear children down for profit make your blood boil like they do mine, hit that subscribe button and join us. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's stand together against everyone who's ever made someone feel worthless. "You were right," Jensen said. "Voss is running a trafficking operation. He takes children from the system, forges paperwork to show they've been placed, then sells them. Flynn overheard him negotiating prices, treating children like inventory." Sierra closed her eyes, her worst fears confirmed. "God, I was afraid it was something like that, but hoping I was wrong." "You weren't wrong, and you tried to stop it." Jensen's voice was firm. "But the system wouldn't let you. Now we're going to stop it without the system." Sierra opened her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have resources the system doesn't. I have connections the system can't access. And I have zero patience for the bureaucracy that's allowed Voss to operate for 8 years. Jensen pulled up Grant's files on his own laptop. "I want to dismantle this operation completely. Not just arrest Voss, but expose everyone involved. Corrupt social workers, judges, anyone who enabled or profited from this." Someone in the room was lying. But who? "That's ambitious," Sierra said carefully. "It would require significant evidence, coordinated action." "I have Flynn. He has photographic evidence stored digitally, files, records, communications. He documented everything before they ran. Jensen leaned back. And I have Brooks, who witnessed Voss conducting business. That's 2 witnesses who can testify. Children's testimony is often challenged in court. Then we make sure the evidence is so overwhelming that testimony is just confirmation. Jensen interrupted. We build an airtight case that can't be dismissed or buried, and we do it fast before Voss realizes we have the boys. Sierra studied him. Mr. Ford, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is dangerous. These people have connections, resources. If they realize you're coming after them, they're welcome to try, Jensen said coldly. I've spent 20 years building an organization that deals with threats. This is just another threat, and I'm very good at eliminating threats. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for family. Grant cleared his throat. Boss, we should discuss the approach. Going after a trafficking network requires careful planning. Then plan carefully, Jensen said. But plan fast. I want full surveillance on Voss within 12 hours. I want every associate identified, every connection mapped, and I want to know where those 23 children are. That's a massive undertaking, Grant said. Then get more people. Use whatever resources you need. Jensen turned to Sierra. I want you to work with Grant. Show him everything you have. Help us identify the key players. And in return, when we move, you get to be there. You get to see this operation torn apart. Sierra hesitated, clearly torn between professional caution and personal vendetta. If we do this, it has to be legal. I won't be part of anything that compromises the case or puts those children at further risk. Everything we do will be documented and legal, Jensen assured her. But we're not waiting for official channels to move at their glacial pace. We're gathering evidence now, and when we have enough, we're delivering it to every authority that exists. FBI, state police, attorney general, media. We're going to make this too big to bury. This single decision gave him the upper hand again. The media, Sierra said thoughtfully. That's actually smart. Public pressure would prevent anyone from making this disappear. Exactly. But first, we need ironclad evidence. That's where you come in. Jensen looked at her directly. Will you help us? Sierra thought for a long moment, then nodded. Those 23 children deserve justice. Flynn and Brooks deserve justice. So yes, I'll help. But we do this right. Agreed. Jensen stood, signaling the strategy session was ending for now. Grant, set Sierra up with workspace and access to our systems. I want preliminary reports by morning. As Grant led Sierra out to begin work, Jensen remained in his study, staring at the files spread across his desk. 23 missing children. 8 years of systematic abuse. A network of corrupt officials who'd enabled it all. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Park. Brooks is having nightmares. Flynn won't sleep, keeps getting up to check on his brother. Thought you should know. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. Jensen made his way quietly to the guest wing. Flynn was indeed awake, sitting in the hallway outside Brooks's room, his back against the wall. The boy looked up as Jensen approached. I can hear him, Flynn said softly. When he has bad dreams. I need to be here when he wakes up scared. Jensen sat down beside him, his back also against the wall. Dr. Park is in there with him. I know, but Brooks needs me, not a stranger. Flynn's voice was tired but firm. He's had nightmares every night since we ran. Always about the men catching us, about being sent back to Voss. He wakes up crying and I have to remind him we're safe. You won't have to anymore, Jensen said. You're not going back. Neither of you. That's a promise, Flynn. You can't promise that, Flynn said, but there was less conviction than before. The system has rules. Eventually they'll come for us. Let them try, Jensen interrupted. I'm in the process of systematically destroying the operation that put you in danger. By the time I'm done, there won't be a system to send you back to. Just a lot of people in prison where they belong. Flynn looked at him in the dim hallway light. Why? Why what? Why are you doing all this? You have your daughter back. You could just move on. Report what happened and let someone else deal with it. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. Jensen thought about how to answer that. Because you saved Willow's life. You kept her safe when she needed help. That creates a debt I take seriously. That's not the whole reason, Flynn said perceptively. No, Jensen admitted. The whole reason is that what Voss did is unforgivable. He took children who were already vulnerable, already hurt by life, and he hurt them more. He treated human beings as merchandise. That kind of evil doesn't get to continue existing. But you're not a cop, not FBI. You're... Flynn trailed off, clearly unsure how to classify Jensen. I'm someone with resources and a willingness to use them when the official channels fail, Jensen said. I operate in gray areas the law can't reach, and sometimes that's necessary to stop people who hide behind the law while breaking it. Flynn absorbed this. You're like a vigilante, but with money and organization. Something like that, Jensen allowed. Does that bother you? No, Flynn said immediately. The law hasn't helped us. The system hasn't protected us. So if it takes someone outside both to make things right, then that's what it takes. He paused. Just promise me you'll actually follow through. Don't make promises and then disappear like everyone else. Brooks can't take another broken promise. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. I don't make promises I can't keep, Jensen said. And I promise you this, Martin Voss and everyone in his network will pay for what they've done. You and Brooks will never have to run again. And those 23 children who disappeared, we're going to find out what happened to them and make sure their stories are told. Flynn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. 23 others? At least. Possibly more. Sierra Wells has been documenting cases for 18 months. She has proof of systematic disappearances. Oh God. Flynn's voice broke. All those kids. We'll get justice, Jensen finished firmly. That's what tomorrow is about. That's what all of this is about. Making sure Voss and his network pay, and making sure no other child goes through what you, Brooks, and those 23 others went through. A soft cry came from Brooks's room. Flynn was on his feet instantly, but Dr. Park appeared in the doorway. He's okay, she said softly. Just a bad dream. I'm going to sit with him until he settles. Flynn hesitated, torn between his need to be there and the bone-deep exhaustion pulling at him. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. Go to bed, Jensen said. I'll stay here. If Brooks needs you, I'll wake you immediately. But right now, you need to sleep. Doctor's orders, remember? Flynn wavered, then finally nodded. Okay, but if he asks for me, I'll get you immediately, Jensen promised. Flynn trudged to his room, and Jensen settled into the hallway, his back against the wall, prepared to keep watch through the night. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Showing these boys through actions, not just words, that they could finally rest. That someone else was keeping watch now. Inside his pocket, Jensen's phone buzzed with incoming reports from Grant. Surveillance teams deploying. Intelligence gathering beginning. The systematic dismantling of Voss's network starting to take shape. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin in earnest. But tonight was about protection. About being the shield these children needed. Jensen Ford had been many things in his life. Criminal, businessman, father. Now he was adding a new role. Protector of children who'd been failed by every system designed to keep them safe. And he took that role as seriously as any oath he'd ever sworn. Dawn broke over the estate with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything seem possible. Jensen had dozed fitfully in the hallway, waking each time Brooks stirred. The boy had settled around 4 a.m., finally sleeping peacefully with Dr. Park keeping watch from a chair beside his bed. By 6 a.m., Jensen was in his study, reviewing the overnight reports Grant's team had compiled. The intelligence was damning. Voss's home had 3 different vehicles registered to different LLCs. His phone records showed regular contact with a network of foster homes across 3 states. Financial records revealed deposits that didn't match his reported income as a foster parent. The pattern was clear. Voss was a middleman, but not the top of the organization. Someone above him was coordinating placements, processing payments, managing the broader network. They needed to identify that person, but he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. A knock on the door announced Grant, looking exhausted but grimly satisfied. "Got something, boss. Remember how Sierra mentioned a judge who kept burying her complaints?" "Judge Thomas Merrick," Jensen said, pulling up the name from memory. "Same one who signed off on 80% of the transfers from Voss's home to those non-existent facilities." Grant pulled up financial records, and who, interestingly, made 3 large property purchases over the past 5 years that he can't quite account for with his judicial salary. "He's taking bribes," Jensen said flatly. "Or kickbacks. Either way, he's dirty." Grant highlighted several transfers. "I've got him meeting with Voss at least twice a month at a restaurant downtown. Always the same place, always in a private room. That's not coincidence. That's coordination," Jensen agreed. "Merrick is the one making it legal on paper, signing the orders, filing the paperwork, making sure everything looks official." And suddenly, he realized he was being played. Which means if we can flip him, we get testimony against the entire network. Or we just gather enough evidence to bury him along with Voss, Jensen said. "Judges who traffic children don't deserve deals." His phone buzzed with an incoming call from the front gate. "Sir, Sierra Wells is here with someone named Flynn. They're requesting access." Jensen frowned. "Flynn's supposed to be sleeping. Send them up." 5 minutes later, Flynn appeared in the study doorway, looking determined despite obvious exhaustion. "I need to show you something. Sierra helped me access the email account where I stored the evidence." Sierra followed him in, laptop open. "Mr. Ford, you need to see this. Flynn's files are extraordinary." What he didn't know was that someone was watching. Flynn sat at Jensen's desk with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. His fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing an encrypted email account, downloading files that had been sitting in draft folders for 3 weeks. "I couldn't risk sending anything," Flynn explained as he worked. "Voss might have been monitoring outgoing emails, so I saved everything as drafts. Encrypted file names, coded subjects in case he somehow got access." Photographs filled the screen, documents, audio files, video clips taken through crack in a door. Flynn had documented everything: the office where Voss conducted his business, the locked file room containing records on dozens of children, phone conversations about pricing and delivery, encrypted communications with unknown parties. "Flynn, this is extraordinary," Sierra breathed. "This is prosecutable evidence. Concrete, undeniable proof of trafficking." "I learned from TV shows," Flynn said simply. "The good investigators always document everything. So I did." Jensen watched the boy work with a mix of awe and fury. This 8-year-old had done what trained investigators had failed to do: compile an airtight case against an organized trafficking network. And he'd done it while simultaneously protecting his 4-year-old brother and staying ahead of professional hunters. But this wasn't even the most shocking part. "There's more," Flynn said, pulling up a specific folder. "I found a master list. Names of every child Voss placed with the network. 28 children, not 23. I cross-referenced against public records. Most of them are still listed as missing or lost in the system." 28, Jensen said, his voice deadly quiet. 28 children. Some of the records have destinations, Flynn continued, his voice tight. Addresses where they were sent. I don't know if they're still there. But he looked at Jensen with those two old eyes. We could find them, maybe, if they're still alive. The implication hung in the air. If they're still alive. We're going to find them, Jensen said with absolute certainty. Every single one. And we're going to bring them home. He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. Grant was already on his phone, mobilizing resources. I'm alerting our contacts in FBI. This is beyond us now. This needs federal coordination. Agreed, but we control the evidence release, Jensen said. I want copies made immediately, stored in multiple locations. Original drives given to FBI, copies to state police, copies to media outlets. This doesn't get buried. On it, Grant confirmed. Sierra was staring at Flynn with something like reverence. You did this. You documented everything these investigators couldn't find. You built the case that's going to take them down. Flynn shook his head. I just took pictures. You're the one who tried to help, who kept investigating even when they told you to stop. We both did our part, Sierra said gently. And now Mr. Ford is going to make sure it matters. Jensen's phone rang. Dr. Park. Mr. Ford, Brooks is awake and asking for Flynn, and Willow would like to see you. We're coming, Jensen said. He looked at Flynn. You've done enough for today. Go be with your brother. We'll handle the rest. But, that moment, everything in the room changed. Flynn, you kept your brother alive for 3 weeks. You documented evidence that's going to save dozens of children. You've done more than anyone should have to do, especially a child. Jensen's voice was firm but kind. Now it's our turn. Let the adults handle it from here. Flynn hesitated, then nodded. You'll tell me? What happens? What you find? Everything, Jensen promised. You've earned that right. But first, take care of Brooks. He needs you more than this investigation does right now. After Flynn left, Jensen turned to Grant and Sierra. Status on surveillance? Teams in place, Grant reported. We have eyes on Voss's home, his office, the judge's chambers. If anyone moves, we'll know. Good, because I want to move today. Jensen pulled up a T-Continue calendar. FBI will need time to mobilize once we hand over evidence. State police will need to coordinate. But I don't want to wait for bureaucracy. Those 28 children have waited long enough. He realized he wasn't alone. Someone else had arrived. What are you proposing? Sierra asked. We identify which addresses Flynn found are most likely to still have children. We send teams to verify. If we find them, we extract them immediately and hand them to proper authorities. Jensen looked at Grant. Can we do that? Legally? Technically, if we witness child endangerment, we have a legal obligation to intervene, Grant said carefully. But there's a fine line between rescue and vigilantism. Then we walk that line carefully, Jensen said. And we document everything. Body cameras, legal observers, coordination with local police when possible. We do this right. And Voss? Sierra asked. What happens to him? Jensen's expression went cold. Voss gets arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned for the rest of his life, along with Judge Merrick and anyone else in the network. They treated children as merchandise. They don't get to be free ever again. He didn't want revenge. He needed it. A soft knock interrupted them. One of the security teams stood in the doorway. Sir, the children are in the east sitting room. They're asking for you. Jensen made his way to the sitting room where Willow, Flynn, and Brooks were gathered. Ranger lay on a dog bed nearby, bandaged but awake and alert. All 3 children looked better. Rested, clean, fed. But the wariness remained in Flynn and Brooks's eyes, the learned caution of those who'd been hurt too often. "Daddy," Willow said, running to him. "Flynn told us you're going to stop the bad men. Is that true?" "Yes, sweetheart. That's true." Jensen knelt so he was at the children's level. "Flynn gave us evidence that's going to help a lot of children. We're going to make sure the bad men can't hurt anyone anymore." Brooks crept closer, his wolf clutched tight. "Will they go to jail?" "Yes, they'll go to jail for a very long time." "Forever?" Brooks asked hopefully. "As close to forever as we can manage," Jensen promised. Something didn't add up, and the truth was darker than he expected. Flynn stood slightly apart, his expression guarded. "What happens to us? After all this is done?" The question hung heavy. What did happen to them? The system had failed them. They had no family, no permanent home. Jensen made a decision that he'd been circling around since yesterday. A decision that felt inevitable and right, in a way few things ever had. "You stay here," he said simply. "With me. With Willow. You become part of this family. Officially and permanently." Flynn stared at him. You want to keep us? Both of us?" "And Ranger," Jensen confirmed. "All three of you. I'm going to start the adoption process immediately. It'll take time to work through legally, but in the meantime, you live here. You're safe here. You're wanted here." CTA number 3. Second emotional arc, at 25 to 35. Min. Are you Team Jensen for taking in Flynn and Brooks? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Brooks looked at Flynn, his eyes wide. "We can stay? With Ranger? And not move anymore?" Flynn's composure cracked completely. Tears streamed down his face as he asked, "Why?" "Why would you do that for us?" "Because you're family now," Jensen said simply. "You saved my daughter's life. You survived things no child should have to survive. You protected your brother when no one else would. That kind of loyalty, that kind of love, that's what family is built on. And I want you in my family." Willow grabbed Flynn's hand. "I want them to stay too, Daddy. Flynn's my friend, and Brooks is little like me. We can be a family together." Jensen looked at Grant standing in the doorway, seeing his head of security's slight nod of approval. Then he looked at the 3 children and the injured dog, seeing the family he'd never expected but suddenly couldn't imagine living without. What followed next was completely unexpected. "So it's decided," Jensen said. "You're staying. Permanently. No more running. No more being afraid. This is your home now." Flynn finally moved, crossing the distance to Jensen and wrapping his arms around him in a fierce hug. Brooks followed immediately, and Willow joined, and suddenly Jensen was surrounded by 3 children who'd been failed by every system designed to protect them. But not anymore. Not ever again. Several hours later, after the children were settled and occupied with Dr. Park, Jensen stood in his study with Grant, Sierra, and a FBI coordinator who'd arrived to take custody of the evidence. "This is extraordinary work," Special Agent Karen Hughes said, reviewing Flynn's files. "We'll be able to bring RICO charges against the entire network. This is going to take down dozens of people across multiple states." "How long?" Jensen asked. "Arrests will begin within 48 hours. We've already coordinated with state police and local jurisdictions. Judge Merrick will be taken into custody first thing tomorrow morning." Hughes looked up. "And Mr. Ford, I want you to know what you've done here, protecting these boys, gathering this evidence. You've saved lives. Not just Flynn and Brooks, but all the children we're going to find because of this." He thought it was over, until he noticed something strange. "I did what anyone should do," Jensen said. "But most people don't." Hughes replied. They look away, or they trust the system will handle it. You didn't look away. You acted. That matters. After Agent Hughes left with copies of the evidence, Jensen stood at his study window looking out over the estate grounds. He could see Flynn and Brooks playing with Ranger under Willow's supervision, watched over by security and Dr. Park. They looked like normal children, laughing and running. That was what he wanted for them. Normal childhoods, safety, the luxury of being children instead of survivors. Grant joined him at the window. You know this is going to be complicated. The adoption process, the media attention when this breaks, the trauma therapy. I know, Jensen said. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. Those boys need a home. They need someone who'll fight for them the way they've fought for each other. I can be that person. Yes, Grant agreed. You can. Everyone thought the deal went smoothly, but they were wrong. They stood in silence, watching the children play. Then Grant's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled slightly. First warrant just got approved. Voss's home and office will be raided at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Judge Merrick is being arrested simultaneously. Good, Jensen said. It's time for them to face what they've done. That evening, after dinner where all three children actually ate full meals, Jensen gathered them in the library. It was time to explain what was going to happen next. Tomorrow morning, the police are going to arrest Martin Voss and the people who worked with him, Jensen said carefully. That means you're going to see news reports, probably. It might be scary to see his name and face again, but I need you to understand. He can't hurt you anymore. He's going to prison, where he belongs. Flynn nodded slowly. What about the other kids? The ones who disappeared? We're looking for them, Jensen promised. Agent Hughes has teams searching every address in your files. Some of those children will come home. Maybe not all. He was honest because Flynn deserved honesty. But we're going to try to find every single one. And then, the gun clicked. And Brooks and I stay here? Flynn asked, still needing confirmation. You stay here, Jensen confirmed. Permanently. This is your home. We're going to make it legal through adoption. But even while that's processing, you're not going anywhere. You're family now. Willow beamed. I've always wanted brothers. Brooks looked up at Jensen with those wide, solemn eyes. Are you going to be our dad? The question stopped Jensen's breath. He'd been thinking in terms of guardian, of protector. But dad? That was something different. Something that carried weight and meaning beyond legal paperwork. Yes, Jensen said, the word feeling right in his mouth. If you'll let me, I'd like to be your dad. Both of you. Brooks looked at Flynn for guidance. Flynn was crying again, but he was smiling. Yeah, we'd like that. That night, as Jensen checked on the children before bed, he found Flynn sitting on his floor beside Ranger's bed, the dog's head in his lap. Can't sleep? Jensen asked from the doorway. Just thinking, Flynn said, about how different today is from yesterday. Yesterday we were hiding in a mill, running from men who wanted to hurt us. Today, we have a home, a real home. It doesn't feel real yet. It will, Jensen said. Give it time. Let yourself believe it's real. Because it is. Flynn nodded, his hand stroking Ranger's fur. Thank you. For all of it. For believing me, for protecting us, for... He struggled with words. For wanting us. He should have walked away, but then he saw it. Thank you for trusting me enough to come to my gate, Jensen said. For giving me the chance to help. For being brave enough to believe in one more adult after so many let you down. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Flynn spoke quietly. In the morning, when they arrest Voss, will it be on the news? Probably. I want to see it, Flynn said. I need to see him being arrested. Need to know it's real. Then we'll watch it together, Jensen promised. All of us. The next morning, as dawn broke over the estate, Jensen's phone lit up with notifications. The raids were happening. Voss was in custody. Judge Merrick was being arrested at his home. The network was collapsing in real time. But the real question was, who planned it? Jensen gathered the children in the sitting room, news playing on the television. They watched as cameras captured Martin Voss being led out of his home in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and fury. He looks small, Flynn said quietly. I thought he was bigger, scarier, but he just looks like a small, angry man. That's all he ever was, Jensen said. You were the one with real power, Flynn. You and Brooks. You survived him. You escaped him. You gathered evidence against him. He's small. You're mighty. They watched as the news reported on the coordinated raids, the arrests, the scope of the investigation. By noon, it was national news. By evening, calls were coming in from journalists, victim advocates, other foster children coming forward with stories. The network was broken. The evidence was public. Justice was beginning. Under the floorboard, he discovered a truth he wasn't ready for. 3 days later, Agent Hughes called with an update. We've located 17 of the 28 children. Most are in foster homes that weren't part of the trafficking network, just regular placements that Voss routed them to after collecting his fee. 4 were in situations that required extraction. All are now safe and being reunited with any family they have, or placed with carefully vetted families. And the other 11? Jensen asked. Still searching, but we won't stop. Your evidence gave us more leads than we've ever had. We're going to find them. See that you do, Jensen said. Those children deserve to come home. That night, 1 month after Flynn had appeared at Jensen's gate with an impossible claim, the Ford family gathered for dinner. Jensen, Willow, Flynn, Brooks, and Ranger, who'd made a full recovery and now held an official position as family protector. They were a family forged in crisis, bound by trauma and triumph, built on the foundation of a child's desperate trust and a father's fierce protection. Brooks was laughing at something Willow said. Flynn was smiling, looking his actual age for the first time since Jensen had met him. Ranger's tail wagged as he begged for scraps. He had no idea the night would end in blood. Jensen looked around the table at his expanded family and felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was what power was supposed to be used for. Protecting the vulnerable, dismantling evil, creating safety where there had been only danger. Daddy, Willow said, pulling him from his thoughts. Flynn wants to know if we can get a second dog. He says Ranger needs a friend. Jensen looked at Flynn, who was trying very hard to look innocent and failing. A second dog? Ranger gets lonely when we're at school, Flynn said with impressive logic. And I could train a rescue dog. Teach them to be as good as Ranger. And Brooks wants to name it Shadow Jr., Willow added helpfully. Jensen looked at his 3 children and his 1 dog, all staring at him with hope. One condition, he said. You 3 have to agree on a name before we even start looking. If you can reach a consensus, we can talk about a second dog. The children immediately huddled together, negotiating with all the seriousness of diplomats. Jensen caught Grant's eye across the room, and his head of security was smiling. This was family. Messy, complicated, unconventional, but absolutely real. They touched my daughter's life, Jensen had said to Sierra Wells that first day. That makes this personal. He'd been right. It was personal, but not in the way he'd meant. It was personal because these weren't just children he'd rescued. They were his children, his family, his responsibility, and his joy. For the first time, He wasn't in control. Flynn and Brooks had come to his gate with nothing but a dog and impossible hope. And Jensen had given them everything: safety, home, family, future. But they'd given him something too: purpose beyond power, love beyond wealth. The reminder that being strong meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The orphan boy had said his dog could locate Jensen's daughter. But what the orphan boy had really done was locate Jensen's heart. And in doing so, had found his own home. If you felt something while watching, please subscribe. That's how I know these stories mean something to you, even on your TV. Take a second to join our community of story lovers. Your support keeps this world of emotions alive.